Thank you for a wonderful group of talks. I think it's a wonderful way to start the symposium today. And I want to remind you that if you have a question, please write it on the card in the back. I have one to start off, and it's really for everyone. As I was listening to the talks, I was writing down the verbs, and I will warn you, some of them I have sort of invented a verb, to think of all the verbs that were used in the talks this morning to describe the way, the role that fashion played for individuals and between and amongst individuals. I heard discovering, self-discovering, presenting, performing, experimenting, self-composing, redressing, adopting, dressing up, consuming, persisting, cultural cross-dressing, purchasing, synthesizing, self-fashioning, celebrating, appropriating, offending, apologizing, horrifying, exchanging, mixing, appreciating, misappropriating, entertaining, hegemonizing. This is clearly a very, very rich topic, and I was wondering, I'll just throw it open to all of you, in listening to each other's papers, and especially this very modern idea of appropriating, which is really what the symposium is sort of considering, whether in the historical examples, is there a way to kind of reframe what you see was happening, but before this very modern idea of appropriating really had been articulated? Do you see that sense of people understanding appropriation in their own contexts? Because I didn't hear that much appropriating in the first three talks, so I'll throw that out to anyone.
I think the women in the ball gowns felt that they were simply accessing things through their fathers. Mm-hmm. So that if their fathers were English and their father wanted to order them a ball gown from London, that was fine. But they were also using the clothing to negotiate higher status in the community. And in some ways, the balls, particularly in Red River, could be compared to quadroon balls in New Orleans, except for by then they actually wanted people to get married in a church, and that people were on the market for partners. And so that kind of clothing was a way, kind of cultural performance. It was also a political thing. One of the things that I thought when you were presenting on the war bonnet, so that has nothing to do with my research, but the internal debate where I'm from is whether women can wear headdresses at all, because they're not called war bonnets, just headdresses. The people who wear headdresses, where I'm from, people actually wear headdresses. They're actually indigenous to the region. It's chiefs that wear them now. The chiefs wear them. So you look at the chief of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations, he gets a headdress. All the elected chiefs get headdresses that are on the council. And the last election, a woman was elected, one of the first women that was elected to the executive. And they live cast, where they were presented and dressed up, and the woman did not get a headdress. And that became a really interesting point of discussion. Do women chiefs get to wear headdresses? Which is like the opposite kind of conversation of everyone and their dog gets to wear a headdress. And the only woman I know within the Indigenous community who wears a headdress is Tammy Cook-Searson, who's the chief of the Lac La Ronge Indian Band, which is the largest First Nation in Saskatchewan. So, it's just, but the decision was made that if her community makes a decision to present a woman chief with a headdress, then that's up to the community to honor their chiefs in that way. The counter discussion has also been, should men lose the right to wear their headdresses if their personal conduct is sort of unchiefly? So that's the conversation within our community right now about headdresses, which is in such a different place to this global appropriation. I'm just so depressed to see what's happening.
Yeah. It's horrifying, yeah.
I think there's, I would draw a line between what I see as negotiating cultural borders between peoples who are relative equals, you know, who share power, perhaps not entirely equally, but each side has a degree of autonomy and interest that it's pursuing, and so appropriating the dress of the other side helps you move in that element with what I see is kind of more the gross commercial exploitation that you see with some of the examples we see in the more modern, you know, Victoria's Secret and all that. I was struck by the carnivalesque elements in the last presentation of, you know, Halloween costumes, right? And there is, in 18th century Britain, masquerades are very popular, and Native American costumes are a popular element in those masquerades, Turks, you know, dressing up in the costume of a Turk, or if you're an elite woman dressing up as a milkmaid or something like that. And there, to me, it's more clearly exploitive and in some ways more modern.
We have time for just one question, and some of these are quite specific, and I would encourage you to just talk to the individuals. We're going to stop for lunch in just a couple of minutes, but I had one about the commercial production of ritual textiles by members of the culture that produce the ritual-associated original, right? So you have a culture actually commercializing their own ritual object, and I'm wondering, I mean, this is all about power. That's the thing. It's all always about power and teasing out who has it, how it's being either exchanged by sovereign agents, ideally, but then that's actually probably pretty rare. So what do we think? And probably, you know, in certainly the three last talks, there's always this element of cultures who sort of capitalize on their own.
Well, I found when I was in Indonesia and Malaysia doing my last research project, which extrapolated into what I said today, I found there was a great deal of compromising their own cultural heritage in textiles, and I was being shown polyester print fabric based on what had been silk woven supplementary weft textiles, as if this was the traditional fabric. And the salespeople, of course, didn't know who I was, and I had enough command of the language to tell them who I was, and then they'd kind of back off on trying to sell that to me. But I definitely found that I was disturbed kind of by the fact that they were so willing to degrade their own heritage by this sort of production. Polyester prints instead of, you know, woven Balinese style fabrics disturbed me.
I don't know. I kind of go in the other direction with that, in the sense that amongst the Maya of Guatemala, they have been encouraged to weave with natural dyes and hand-spun cotton for a European or American museum culture, not necessarily really for themselves. And their natural inclination is to continue to be part of the present for what they do for themselves and on their bodies. And I think we need to be very sensitive to sometimes what we want to be this frozen, precious, original culture. But culture is never precious and never original. It's always changing. And I think the agency of contemporary indigenous people, I think we have to allow for kitsch and expression that takes ways and turns that are not what we would call traditional. And I think that's hugely important.
And on that brilliant note by my colleague, I'm going to thank our panelists. I welcome you to continue talking to the panelists, and we're going to come back at 1:30, so enjoy lunch. Oh, sorry.
I just want to remind everyone that this room, you need to take your things with you. There's not going to be any security in this room while you're gone. So we'll see you back promptly at 1:30. Thank you.